Warm Pacific greetings to all of you. So very nice to see so many of you here this morning on the last day of the platform. Welcome to the high-level dialogue session 5 of the Global Platform, and it's a great pleasure to welcome all of you to this session, which is entitled Pursuing Coherence Between the Sendai Framework, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and of course the Paris Agreement. My name is Audrey Almore, and I am the Deputy Director General of the Secretariat of the Pacific Community. I'm based in Fiji, in the lovely city of Suva. We are often known as SPC, and we are the principal scientific and technical organisation in the Pacific region, and we have been proudly supporting our 26 member states in their development journey since 1947. It really is an honour for me to be here on behalf of SPC and indeed the Pacific region, and of course the many Pacific delegates that are here amongst you this morning. Today's session is focused on exploring the pursuit of coherence between the Sendai Framework 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement. Sometimes people say this is a total journey around finding the Holy Grail, but at least today we're going to make some movement towards this journey. Building resilience is a shared overall objective of all the post-2015 agendas. And in my region, for instance, we in the Pacific are embracing a more coherent approach to sustainable development. In 2016, our leaders endorsed the Framework for Resilient Development, which in the Pacific has now been guiding us for some years towards an integrated approach to address climate change and disaster risk management. All our efforts at this time are centred on putting in place regional infrastructure and processes that build upon already the work that has started in the Pacific since 2008, when we first started doing joint national action plans. We are trying, and I know as a region we are not alone, in the quest of coherence, and that quest has brought us here today. But these integrated processes are not without challenges, and we have today a very insightful and thoughtful panel in front of you who will discuss with all of us the benefits, the challenges, the best practices and pathways, some forward thinking in addressing the challenges of this topic. What the session will focus on is how we might think about the key benefits, some of the practical ideas and pathways to coherence. For example, how does the Sendai Framework act as a catalyst for a more coherent, inclusive action? How can an inclusive approach really bring a stronger focus on reducing poverty and vulnerability? So our esteemed panellists this morning will help us unpack some of these challenges from their perspective. They will speak to some of the issues and their own personal perspectives, but also speak from their perspectives around representation. So we have on the panel this morning country representatives, we have a regional organisation represented this morning, and an agency-based development agency. The structure of the session this morning is I will start with a round of questions for the panellists, and we will have a chance to talk with them much further in the discussion aspect of the programme. I will invite, midway through the session, a reflection commentary from Ms. Osaka Okai, who is with us this morning, and Ms. Okai is the UN ASG and Director of UNDP Crisis Bureau. Good morning to you. It's great to have you with us. And then you, the audience, it will be your turn to participate in this discussion, and you will be able to do that by using your app, where you can upload your questions. And we will be able to view these questions from the front here, and the panellists will be invited to respond appropriately. What we would like to do today is conclude with some real clarity and proposition around recommendations and concrete actions that will contribute to promoting coherence And so in addition to the app, which you can use for your questions, you will also have the chance to submit recommendations on the app, and these recommendations will be included in the conference report. So you have a bit of work. Let me now turn to introducing our very distinguished panel this morning. And may I first introduce, to my right, Mr. Norbert Bartley, who is the Deputy Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany. Good morning to you, sir. Bulla Vinaka. Mr. Norbert Bartley spent 2 years as Senior Policy Officer for the Public Relations, followed by 6 years as Press Secretary at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports of Baden-Württemberg. He has been the CDU-CSU Parliamentary Group spokesperson for budgetary policy for 10 years and the Vice Chair of the CDU Group of the Federal State of Baden-Württemberg Parliamentary State Secretary to the Federal Minister for Transport and Digital Infrastructure. Mr. Bartley became the Deputy Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development in 2018. It's a pleasure to have you with us this morning. To my left, may I introduce Mr. Javier Abugatis Fatuli, who is the head of the National Centre for Strategic Planning, CPLAN, of the Government of Peru. Good morning to you, sir. Mr. Abugatis is currently President of the Directive Council of the National Centre for Strategic Planning of Peru. Previously, he held the following positions: President of the Roundtable for the Fight Against Poverty, 3 times Vice Minister of Economy, Technical Secretary of the Interministerial Commission for Social Affairs, and General Director of Public Credit. To my right, may I introduce Her Excellency Ambassador Minata Samate Sezuma. Good morning, Madam. Madam Sezuma is the Commissioner for Political Affairs of the African Union Commission and has been since January 2017. She is a native of Burkina Faso and brings to the AUC over 30 years of experience in law, diplomacy, governance, and international relations. At the international level, Her Excellency has served as Director of the United Nations and the African Union Hybrid Mission in Darfur, where she has contributed to strengthening humanitarian affairs, peacekeeping operations, and preventative diplomacy. Good morning, Madam, and it's a pleasure to have you on our panel this morning. And finally, to my left, may I introduce Dr. Coco Warner, who is the Manager of Adaptation Programs with the UNFCCC. Dr. Coco Warner has helped, current role is to help countries find ways to avert, minimize, and address risks to human well-being from climate change. It's a big job. At the UNFCCC, she oversees the work on climate impacts, risks and vulnerabilities, including the Fiji Clearinghouse for Risk Transfer, the Task Force on Displacement, and the Technical Expert Group on Comprehensive Risk Management, all under loss and damage. You will have on your app the very extended bios of our esteemed panelists, so I'm not going to read them all, but I do encourage you to read those. Before I invite our panelists to make some open remarks, I wish to just alert you that 2 of our panelists will speak in French and Spanish, so do have your headphones handy. Mr. Bartley, I will talk to you first, if I may, and may I start with you and invite you to share with us what you perceive to be the most obvious commonalities of the 3 agendas, and what do you see as the real alignment opportunities? Your views on key benefits, and can you give some key practical pathways for coherence? The floor is yours, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in answering this question, let's talk about the key benefits and practical pathways to coherence. Let me start then with the obvious commonalities of the 3 agendas. The 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement, and the Sendai Framework share the common goal of reducing the harmful effects of natural hazards and climate change. It's only in combination that they cover the full range of potential risks to sustainable development. The success of the 3 agendas will depend on the successful and coherent implementation of all of them. Breaking up silos and targeting a comprehensive approach is key to success. Incoherence is already showing its negative effects. There is evidence of important public investments in infrastructure becoming money pits because initial planning did not consider the multiple hazards they were exposed to. Incoherent government actions do not go unnoticed by the population, adding the cost of public trust erosion. Incoherence can lead to overlapping, redundant, or even conflicting acts and regulations. One consequence, for example, are policies on shoreline protection that undermine the improvement of local livelihoods because fishermen's communities are evicted. And furthermore, reporting on the different agendas will be difficult when ministries do not sufficiently exchange information about the different agenda actions taken by them. Greater coherence is, in contrast, clearly beneficial. Synergies identified from an improved knowledge base can generate better policies and practices. And for example, if climate data is taken into account in disaster risk management, risk analyses become more reliable. Greater coherence allows resources to be used more efficiently. And what are the practical pathways to coherence? Greater agenda coherence will not happen automatically. It needs political will and explicit actions. Suitable entry points for greater coherence at national and local level can be found in the planning, implementation, and reporting phases. The different global agendas each have their own planning regimes, such as development plans, national adaptation plans, the NAP, and DRM strategies. Integrating the different plans and strategies plays an important role in fostering coherence. And greater coherence needs better cooperation in the public sector and participation mechanisms for all sectors of society. Financing agreements that facilitate expenditure across the different agendas, as well as public sector investment policies that take sustainable development criteria, DRM, and climate change requirements all embracingly into account are another lever. Respective state regulation in the form of norms or standards is another entry point for better coherence. And finally, coherent agenda reporting depends on a common database that can be accessed easily by all stakeholders. Let me conclude my intervention with a plea for good enough coherence. There are no blueprints, and we have to take the benefits of sectoral specialization into account. Given diverse contexts, we can only strive to get closer to a state of coherence that helps to reduce the costs of incoherent action and to capitalize the benefits of coherence. So thank you very much.
Minister, thank you for initially hitting on the really big things around our challenges around coherence. In particular, I think the point that you made around the overlapping and issue around redundant regulations. It is a big issue, the burdensome of reporting on all these frameworks, and I know in the region I come from, small island states, the capacity to report on multiple frameworks is incredibly challenging. But thank you for starting us off with those few comments. There's clearly much more to explore. I'd like to now invite Mr. Abogatis, and welcome to you this morning, sir. If I may turn to you and invite you to talk with us a little bit on what you see are the macro-level challenges within the landscape of your work, and in particular what your view are around the key elements required to achieve coherence in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. The floor is yours, sir.
Muchas gracias, buenos días a todos. La búsqueda de coherencia, yo creo que parte, por un lado, de realmente utilizar la Agenda 2030. Es decir, la Agenda 2030 costó años en construir. Varios países que estamos acá contribuimos a la construcción de la Agenda después del milenio. Y la Agenda dice, hagamos un esfuerzo por integrar políticas económicas, sociales, ambientales, tomando en cuenta todos los acuerdos y convenciones anteriores. Creo que no hemos estado haciendo eso con la fuerza y la urgencia de vida. Ahora, para poder prestar atención y generar coherencia, creo que hay una entrada general, y después quisiera comentar otras, es prestar atención a la vida diaria de la gente localmente en un contexto complejo. Sabemos la complejidad del planeta, pero la complejidad local, por diferencias locales, que exige conocer mejor las realidades, el territorio, las culturas, y con eso empezar a tomar decisiones sobre desarrollo sostenible. No estamos haciendo eso con la urgencia y con la fuerza de vida. Entonces, si quisiera relatar desde el lado de Perú cómo estamos tratando de generar esas condiciones. Y creo que podríamos usar los informes nacionales voluntarios como una referencia, los informes nacionales voluntarios sobre la implementación de la Agenda 2030 como una primera herramienta para juntar información. En nuestro primer informe nacional voluntario, que fue presentado en Nueva York en el 2017, narrábamos cómo la Agenda 2030 para el desarrollo sostenible estaba siendo usada en un proceso en el país para generar una visión de futuro de largo plazo que permitiese actualizar políticas de Estado. Y ese es un primer tema, políticas que van más allá de un gobierno. Eso sería un primer esfuerzo para dar continuidad. También se describió cómo habíamos iniciado la actualización de políticas y planes a nivel de los 3 niveles de gobierno. Eso ya son políticas de gobierno centrado en el bienestar de las personas, por un lado, pero también con énfasis en mejorar la gestión de riesgos e incluyendo el cambio climático como un factor muy importante. Ese conjunto nos parecía en el 2017 el inicio, desde el 2016, de la implementación de la agenda. En nuestro informe 2018 mencionamos que aún la vida de los habitantes en nuestro país enfrenta retos enormes, ambientales, económicos, sociales e institucionales, y lo que se nota es que solo una decidida acción de la sociedad y del Estado va a poder introducir los cambios necesarios para mejorar la presencia de la sociedad y Estado en el territorio. Y eso es lo que permitiría una mejora sustancial de la vida de la gente. Las dificultades son mayores entonces en países como Perú, ¿no?, con una diversidad en todos los campos y con un fraccionamiento social prolongado. La Amazonía, los Andes, la costa y el océano son los espacios geográficos diversos. Perú tiene más de 80 de las zonas de vida del mundo. Entonces, cambio climático nos afecta de 80 o más maneras distintas y necesitaríamos a toda la academia y a todos los centros de investigación tratando de adelantarnos a lo que va a ser y adaptarnos a tiempo. Eso tampoco está ocurriendo, esto también lo discutimos en 2017. Conocer mejor, entonces, exige después esfuerzos tanto de desarrollo como de convivencia misma en los territorios. Los desafíos, entonces, otra vez incluyen este esfuerzo de diseño e implementación del conjunto de políticas económicas, sociales, ambientales, y que estén claramente al servicio de la gente. ¿Cómo logramos integrar esto? A partir de abril de este año, Perú hizo un esfuerzo, a pesar de los problemas internos que tenemos, y ha logrado generar un consenso de sociedad, Estado y partidos políticos a una visión que empezó siendo una visión al 2030, pasó a ser 40, ahora es una visión al 2050 que está disponible y que se ha generado por un consenso de representantes de sociedad, Estado y partidos políticos. Creemos que generar objetivos de largo plazo como Estado va a ayudar a que en el corto plazo podamos actuar con la urgencia de vida para enfrentar los riesgos y adecuarnos a los cambios. Creemos que es indispensable una acción inmediata. También quisiéramos reiterar el pedido que hicimos en el 2017 de que el conjunto de las agencias de Naciones Unidas en los países apoye estas acciones, porque a veces nos fraccionamos también, nos fraccionamos internamente en los países, en nuestros ministerios, pero también en las agencias y en la cooperación. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abugatis. And it's such an interesting area, the complexity of integrated planning and so forth. But I think there was a couple of points in there that you raised that immediately I could relate to, which is one is the issue of local context when you are involved in integrated planning, and also this a whole approach around people-centeredness and making sure that planning does stay within with people at the forefront. So thank you for your introductory remarks. May I now turn to Madam Sesuma and talking to you this morning, and we're very privileged to have you on the panel because you will provide for us a fairly unique perspective of a regional position around coherency. And if I could just get you to start us off, please, if you would please share your reflections on how the 50-year Pan-African agenda, the Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, contributes to coherency amongst and the alignment around the post-2015 global frameworks. Madam, the floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la modératrice. Je salue les éminents panélistes autour de cette table et bonjour, Mesdames et Messieurs. Madame la modératrice, merci pour cette occasion que vous donnez à l'Union africaine de participer à ce débat et surtout aussi d'apprendre des autres et d'écouter les autres. Surtout, vous venez d'une région très difficile avec une grande expérience. Je crois qu'au-delà de ce panel, j'apprends beaucoup de tous les participants et merci beaucoup pour cette occasion. Revenant à la question, je dois ajouter que le cadre de Sendai, les objectifs de développement durable et l'accord de Paris fournissent une feuille de route qui est claire pour la résilience et le développement dans notre monde. Ceux-ci sont mis en œuvre avec succès, de manière cohérente. Ils sont à mesure, je suis certaine, d'accroître la résistance des populations africaines et de ce monde au choc et rendre un monde beaucoup plus sûr, beaucoup meilleur, et surtout, nous allons léguer aux générations futures un monde où il ferait bon vivre. Les trois cadres mondiaux sont intimement liés selon nous, de sorte que nous n'avons pas d'autres options, mais plutôt de nous assurer qu'ils sont mis en œuvre de manière synergique. Je vous donnerai deux exemples. Il y a l'article 8 de l'accord de Paris qui porte principalement sur les efforts de risque de catastrophe. Et de même, les objectifs 9, 11 et 13 des ODD sont conformes également au cadre de Sendai pour la réduction des risques de catastrophe. Assurer donc, mesdames et messieurs, la cohérence entre ces trois cadres permettrait, j'en suis certaine, une utilisation optimale des ressources et du temps limité et des ressources qui ne sont pas souvent disponibles. Mesdames et messieurs, avant l'agenda mondial post-2015, l'Union africaine, vous l'avez dit, madame, avait élaboré un agenda panafricain de 50 ans. L'agenda 2063, c'est une Afrique, l'Afrique que nous voulons, nous, au niveau du continent. Premièrement, cet agenda 2063 a fourni une cohérence entre les cadres mondiaux pour l'après 2015. Vous me demanderez pourquoi, parce que l'agenda 2063 a intégré l'agenda mondial post-2015 dans son plan de mise en œuvre de l'agenda 2063, parce que ce post-2015 est arrivé après notre agenda qui a été adopté en 2013. Et nous l'avons intégré dans le plan de mise en œuvre décennale 2013. Où l'agenda a été adopté jusqu'en 2023. Le plan a été examiné par nos instances de l'Union africaine et adopté. L'agenda mondial post-2015 a été repris dans un plan que nous avons révisé. Deuxièmement, il convient d'ajouter aussi que la Commission de l'Union africaine a mis au point un système de suivi des rapports et de rapports du programme d'action pour l'Afrique pour la mise en œuvre de la stratégie pour l'Afrique et du cadre de Sendai pour la réduction des risques de catastrophes. Le système suivra tous les indicateurs liés à la réduction des risques de catastrophes dans le programme de développement durable à l'horizon 2030, l'accord de Paris et le cadre de Sendai. Des progrès ont certes été réalisés et le ministre l'a souligné, mais la coordination de la mise en œuvre des 3 cadres mondiaux à tous les niveaux reste un défi que nous devons relever. Je dirais également que les plateformes existantes pour la mise en œuvre du cadre de Sendai, des ODD et l'accord de Paris ne doivent pas être tenus isolément. Il nous faut prendre cela ensemble. Chaque plateforme devrait assurer la participation effective des autres, car tous ces cadres sont structurellement imbriqués et fortement dépendants les uns des autres. Bien que les parties prenantes concernées participent de manière significative à chacune des plateformes respectives, cela ne devrait pas se limiter à une simple participation et à l'organisation de rencontres, de manifestations parallèles. Les dépositaires clés des différentes plateformes à tous les niveaux devraient être inclus dans le processus de planification et l'organisation des différentes plateformes afin de renforcer la cohérence. Il est donc nécessaire, mesdames et messieurs, de renforcer cette cohérence au niveau de nos États, au niveau continental et au niveau mondial. Ces dernières années, nous avons assisté à des progrès dans ce domaine grâce à des programmes de gestion des risques de catastrophes intégrés. Mais pour terminer, je dirais que ceci doit être amélioré et promu et nous n'avons pas le choix que d'assurer cette cohérence. Merci, Madame la modératrice.
Thank you very much, Madam Suzuma. I was reflecting as you were speaking around the regional and the integrated approaches is exactly the experience for the Pacific. When you have the responsibility of looking after so many nations and various frameworks, the alignment can be incredibly challenging. So I agree that coordination is the big issue. Turning to my next speaker, and Dr. Coco is here, and it's great that UNFCCC actually is here, so welcome to you. My question for you this morning is if you could help us understand a little bit, please, in the midst of all the UN reform agenda that is going on globally, what exactly is UNFCCC doing to reduce risk in the regions and in the countries? Thank you.
Thank you very much. UNFCCC is so privileged to be here and would like to thank the Excellencies and, of course, UNDRR. Big congratulations for this important event and the work. We're also, of course, really privileged to be in a room with all of the countries that we, as part of the United Nations family, support in your critical work, and to all of the participants. It's been really edifying this week to hear your experiences, your leadership, and the learning has been tremendous, so thank you. Worldwide, countries want one thing. They want well-being for their people. And as we've heard from our leaders in planning in countries and in regions, you're looking to the future. And you see a bright future for our children and for our societies. And for those of us gathered here at the Global Platform in Geneva in 2019, we know that disruptions of many kinds get in the way of that which we hold most dear today and that which we want most. We want well-being, we want balance, a healthy planet, healthy people, education, all of these aspirations that are embodied in the Sustainable Development Goals that unifies us in a common purpose. And we're building on the shoulders of our ancestors, of our parents and grandparents, of all the institutional work that has brought us to this point. Many mistakes and a lot of progress. It's very hopeful. And now it's our turn to look into the future, which is actually here today. We are building the future into which we're about to step, and there are a lot of challenges ahead. UNFCCC understands these challenges, and what we're doing is we're asking countries, or actually we're helping countries. They've delivered the Paris Agreement. Countries have said the world that they want to move into, at least in terms of climate change and a climate resilient future for all of us. And there are three parts of this plan: ambition, acceleration, and action. We're now in an era where we are implementing, we're actually delivering the Paris Agreement. So for many of us or all of you who were part of our most recent climate conference in Katowice, now the countries have come together and delivered a plan. How will we together reach into this future and build it together? This year, we never stop. We always have milestones to reach for that keeps us moving ahead. And what we're planning on is in just 3 years from now, we're going to take a family picture of the whole planet. And we'll take that in 2023 with what we call a global stocktake. And the picture will show us is everything that we've done from today in 2019 and everything that's come before, is it commensurate with the change that we're experiencing? Are we doing enough? Where do we need to offer more support? Where do we need to reach out and take hands and do more work? And so from 2019, today, out until then, we have a series of milestones. Katowice in the UNFCCC process was our most recent milestone. We'll meet again. So many friends in the room that I see will join us in June for the next set of conversations. Many of you will meet again at the Secretary General's summits on the margins of the General Assembly in September. Many of us will again meet in Santiago, and then 2020 and 2021 and 2022 and 2023 when we'll take the family photo. And that's a lot of talking, but what happens in between is a lot of work, and that is the work where we're seeking this coherence, again, for what we want most, and we don't have all that much time, and all of you know that. And what we hope is that we will now, as decision makers, and for all of us who support you, that we'll now make choices. We're at a series of crossroads. All of these milestones are points for decision and action. And it's on all of us, but particularly to support our leaders and to reach out with each other and talk about the pros and cons, talk about the winners and losers, do the best that we can with prudence and foresight to formulate plans that will, as much as possible, really leave no one behind, and step together, step by step, into this future that we're building. We will reap the consequences of our decisions, and that's very sobering. But there's also untold promise ahead of us if we can make these choices prudently and wisely and together. And maybe just in closing, an analogy. In my library, I found a very old recording of a philosopher, Bertrand Russell, a big philosopher from the 20th century. The recording is from 1957, and he was speaking to a prominent group of scientists, probably some of your grandparents, who were gathered together to ask about the future of humanity. They were talking about nuclear safety and wartime matters. But just as an analogy, it's not quite the perfect fit. But Bertrand Russell said, you know, human suffering in the past for hundreds and hundreds of years, or maybe even more, has happened because of ignorance, because we just didn't know, and because of folly. And way back in 1957, it was this burgeoning scientific era, and we're certainly even farther along today in this explosion of information and knowledge. He said, now we've overcome the ignorance, and it is our choice now to decide what future we want. Do we want that untold, beautiful prosperity? And I'm sure back in 1957, even such a wise philosopher couldn't see the world that many of us enjoy. Or will we choose a darker future? And we have similar choices ahead, perhaps on a larger scale. And I hope then just to encourage all of us to keep working together. For the countries in the room, we'll do everything that we can to support you and help you as you're making these difficult decisions. I thank you.
Coco, thank you for those preliminary comments. And I guess one of the things that is so incredibly interesting, and I think from your agency perspective, you probably do have some oversight around the movement of countries actually beginning to bring climate change and disaster risk reduction together. I wonder if you could just comment a little bit about where you see if there is real progress in that direction.
So with all of those tensions, both very positive and very difficult, we see lots of progress. And I think our opportunity and challenge is to keep pace. So it's very edifying, for example, and you'll know much more of this from the Pacific region, but it's so exciting to see many Pacific states integrating their planning. So we have national adaptation planning. I have colleagues here today that will speak more about that. And of course, all of you are in the world of disaster risk reduction planning. And we see that Pacific states have found ways to integrate those plans so that both the plans are coordinated as well as the funding that goes into them to support those countries. So there's one specific example. We see progress in nationally determined commitments. That's one of the delivery mechanisms of the Paris Agreement. But we see countries having this vision. We have to reduce risks and preempt whatever we can. We have to plan. We have to put contingency arrangements into place. We see a lot of progress in what countries are telling us that they're doing or that they're planning to doing. And of course, the very not easy, but progressing conversations around all kinds of support, technology, finance, capacity building, and we're doing that together. As always, the question is, will we take these actions in a manner that's commensurate with the challenges that we face? But there's every reason to be optimistic.
Thank you very much. We've come to a point actually in the discussion where I now would like to invite, if I may, Ms. Asaka Okai, who is the UN ASG and Director of UNDP's Crisis Bureau. And Ms. Okai, it's great to have you here this morning, and the panelists have already started, highlighted, I suppose, some really interesting themes as part of this panel discussion. I wonder if you'd just like to, at this point, make some reflection comments before we go back to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, for the opportunity to share a few observations from UNDP. As we know, the acknowledgement of risk-informed development across all strands of the 2013 agenda calls for greater policy coherence and to foster a new development paradigm that addresses risks to development and risks from development for achieving resilience and sustainability. In recognition of this, UNDP is proactively advancing the integration of disaster and climate risk considerations into development planning and budgeting, as well as into the national adaptation plans. And when doing so, we seek to pursue approaches that are also sensitive to other types of risks, such as conflict, environmental degradation, and health-related risks. For example, in the Solomon Islands, to enhance food and nutrition security in communities in Guadalcanal province, we supported the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock with resilient community farming. The project identified climate and disaster-related risks to the agricultural sector, developed measures to address these risks, and realized resilient farming systems in communities across the province. We have also made great strides in nearly 18 countries with integrating natural hazard risk considerations into the national and subnational SDG roadmaps, while ensuring linkages with sectoral development plans and processes. UNDP sees a great potential in strengthening the links between NDCs and national disaster risk reduction strategies. DRR is already recognized in over 80 national climate commitments, and as part of our NDC support programs, we are committed to strengthen these links further. Integration of DRR into national adaptation plans provides an opportunity to systematically consider different risks in development decisions and accelerate the common goal of resilient development. The principle of leave no one behind provides yet with another entry point for fostering coherence. Our UNDP guidance note on what does it mean to leave no one behind identifies very clearly that the disaster risk is one of 5 principal factors that pushes people into margins of the development process, alongside with discrimination, geography, and socio-economic status and governance. Addressing these factors together will set free opportunities to foster coherence. In summary, in UNDP, we have already identified a range of entry points for fostering coherence by synergies between disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and sustainable development for a coherent and catalytic approach to sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's warming actually. I mean, you've been sharing some statistics that quite shocked me, that there are a large number of countries that have already started to integrate both the climate and disaster risk reduction agendas, and thank you for using an example of the Pacific. It was much appreciated. To the audience now, and I want you to be ready to use your app. We are halfway through the session, and we are going to start to share some of the questions fairly shortly. Just before we do that, I might just revert back to the panel at this stage and just maybe put another couple of questions to the panel, just again further to help stimulate some of the dialogue. So, Mr. Bartlett, I might just come back to you and ask you to dig a little bit deeper for us around and to build on some of the first comments that you made in your first intervention. Maybe you could be a little bit more explicit with us and share with us what really the German Development Cooperation is doing to foster coherence between the Sendai framework and the other 2 frameworks, of course, the Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement, and talk with a little bit with us about your understanding and how that integration is working. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. I think above all, we promote an integrated understanding of climate and disaster risk reduction. We take strategies, measures and instruments from climate risk reduction, disaster risk reduction, CCA and social protection and combine it to a comprehensive approach. Our global initiative on disaster risk management, GIDRM, supports selected international and national governmental and non-governmental actors in their ambition to achieve coherence between the post-2015 agendas with regard to planning, implementing and reporting on DRM. The initiative provides advice on how to integrate the requirements of the Sendai framework into national sustainability strategies. And another focus is to incorporate DRM and climate adaptation measures more systematically into public investment decisions. Under the NAP Global Network, launched at COP22 by Development Minister Müller, and within bilateral projects supporting national adaptation planning exercises in partner countries, we support the integration of climate risks into national policy planning and budgeting processes, starting to focus on coherence with disaster risk response plans. Germany supports the INSU Resilience Global Partnership, which seeks to increase access to risk finance and insurance and integrates them into comprehensive risk management approaches to protect poor and vulnerable people against remaining climate risks. At the G20 level, and as a contribution to the G20 Adaptation Work Programme, we commissioned OECD to carry out a study on common grounds between Sendai framework and the Paris Agreement that feeds into Japan's G20 priority of mainstreaming DRR. Work on case studies has started in Peru, Philippines, and Ghana. Thanks.
Thank you very much. The Global Initiative Minister sounds very interesting, and I think that's something that should be showcased. It talks quite directly to the formal integration of many of those sectorial issues that you raised in your first comment. May I just go to Mr. Abougatis, please, and to maybe if you could just talk to us again a little bit, building on your first intervention. And you raised some critical issues around microeconomic issues, for example, and I was particularly interested in that area and how institutions, I think, namely policy institutions, could firstly play a role in building coherence, and then, of course, the maintenance of coherence in the implementation of the agenda. We know, I guess, execution is the issue often, not so much the policy and planning, but how we actually get it off the ground. So, sir, I'd be very happy for you to share some of that commentary.
Gracias. Sí, en el caso de Perú, Perú cuenta con un sistema de gestión de riesgo de desastres que está en una política de Estado. Después el Congreso aprobó una ley y tenemos un plan de acción de gestión de riesgos. Pero ¿cómo operar eso a nivel de los 3 niveles de gobierno? Y esa es una discusión que tuvimos entre el sistema de gestión de riesgos, el sistema de planeamiento y el Ministerio de Economía para discutir cómo esto aterriza. Lo que se ha hecho reciente, bueno, en 2017, es que en las normas de planeamiento, en las guías, hay una obligación de toda entidad pública, de las 2.800 que tenemos en Perú, de incluir en sus planes estratégicos y operativos institucionales, es decir, en el plan de cada institución, líneas que cubren todo el ciclo de gestión de riesgo. Y se les pone mucho énfasis en el conocimiento de realidad y en la identificación de esas realidades diversas para disminuir riesgos y prepararse. Incluso se les pide que 2 veces al año prueben los planes de contingencia o de continuidad operativa. No es que esté así, pero digamos, hay 800 entidades muy pequeñas, nuestros municipios muy pequeños, que no lo pueden hacer. No se lo pedimos a ellos, se lo pedimos a los 196 provinciales, pero a ellos sí se les pide que conozcan mejor sus cuencas, sus subcuencas, que entiendan el comportamiento y que, por lo tanto, cualquier diseño de cualquier acción sectorial tome en cuenta eso para el diseño y ejecución. Está crecientemente siendo así. Entonces, es que el conjunto, además de los sistemas administrativos de un país, tiene que tratar de integrar también eso, habiendo puesto las políticas y los planes. En ese conocimiento de realidad tan difícil que mencioné en la primera parte, es que necesitamos el concurso de todos. Un solo nivel de gobierno o los 3 no pueden llegar a conocer esa complejidad de realidades locales. Entonces, en cada área geográfica le estamos pidiendo a las universidades, a la academia, a los centros de investigación, a colegios profesionales, a empresas, y estos mecanismos que tenemos en Perú de sociedad y Estado, que ayuden a identificar esas realidades y que ayuden a entender cómo podríamos prevenir mejor. Naturalmente, a nivel de un territorio ya está integrado, el cambio está ahí presente, ya cambiaron, ya subió la temperatura, ya cambió la zona de cultivo, ya los fenómenos se han hecho más intensos y ya la adaptación es indispensable. Entonces no es que le estamos contando algo nuevo. El asunto es cómo las capacidades locales, que aún son muy débiles, pueden hacerlo. Entonces, insistimos, lo que habría que hacer es reforzar capacidades locales para manejarse mejor, porque nadie va a llegar a tiempo ni nadie va a entender mejor que el nivel local.
This is such an excellent example of institutional compliance. And thank you for sharing that example. I mean, always the challenge is not only about getting the agencies to report and to work together. As you know, many of our public departments are already so incredibly siloed that often integration is challenging. I wanted to move to Madam Suzuma and maybe just hear from you, Madam, if we could. Just some aspects around monitoring on the African Programme of Action. We're beginning to hear how integration is taking place, but of course how our member countries really report on this change process. And maybe you could just share with us what is happening in Africa, and particularly on the reporting of the Programme of Action and the implementation of the strategy that you talked a little bit about earlier. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la modératrice. Le plan d'action pour la RRC décrit comment l'Afrique mettra en œuvre le cadre de Sendai au niveau de nos États membres. Outre les 7 objectifs globaux du cadre de Sendai, il faut rappeler que le programme d'action définit 5 objectifs additionnels, des objectifs qui sont propres au continent africain parce que nous avons aussi notre spécificité. Les États africains, pour leur part, se sont engagés à poursuivre les objectifs mondiaux ainsi que les 5 objectifs spécifiques propres à l'Afrique. En tant que dépositaire du programme d'action, la Commission de l'Union africaine doit coordonner la mise en œuvre du programme d'action et rendre compte tous les 2 ans. À cet effet, notre commission, en collaboration avec ses États membres et également les communautés économiques régionales qui sont les piliers de notre organisation, nous avons aussi les organes et autres institutions spécialisées à développer un cadre de suivi et de rapport qui a été validé et au niveau même des communautés économiques régionales et par les États membres de l'Union africaine en Afrique du Sud à Johannesburg en juin 2018. Et cela a été adopté par les ministres africains en charge de la RRC lors de la plateforme Afrique pour la réduction des risques de catastrophe qui a eu lieu à Tunis en octobre 2018. Le cadre de suivi propose 13 indicateurs. Je n'insisterai pas là-dessus et s'il y a des questions, nous allons répondre. Nous avons 13 indicateurs pour suivre et rendre compte des progrès accomplis dans la réalisation des 5 objectifs spécifiques du programme d'action sur la période 2015-2030. Les données de 9 de ces 13 indicateurs seront collectées au niveau des États membres par l'intermédiaire de points focaux, tandis que les données des 4 indicateurs récents seront recueillies par les points focaux au niveau de nos communautés économiques régionales. Les points focaux des États membres, les 55 États membres, ont reçu une formation technique parce que sans formation, il n'est pas possible de faire correctement le travail. Ces gens ont reçu une formation technique en pratique, c'était en mars dernier, sur comment le processus de collecte et de présentation des données dans le système de suivi élaboré par l'Union africaine. Ce système de suivi identifie et définit les indicateurs appropriés pour la collecte des données de routine et conceptualise une base de données pour la conservation des données qui ont été recueillies régulièrement. Il propose également un plan pour des examens et évaluations stratégiques périodiques et des outils de collecte de ces données pour ces examens et évaluations. Enfin, le système sera bientôt mis en ligne avec l'appui technique de UNISDR et ce qui permettra à la Commission de l'Union africaine et à ses parties prenantes d'utiliser le cadre de suivi et de ces processus pour renforcer continuellement les interventions du programme d'action sur la base d'une évaluation, d'une réflexion critique des apports, des produits, des résultats et des impacts escomptés des activités du programme. Cela signifie également que le système de suivi et d'information ne devrait pas se limiter uniquement à des fonctions de contrôle ou de responsabilité, mais aussi de faciliter la participation, la décentralisation, l'apprentissage et la flexibilité. Voilà un peu ce que nous faisons au niveau de l'Union africaine. Merci, Madame la modératrice.
Very good. Thank you very much. It was a very good example of the importance of reporting and monitoring. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to now move, if I may, to the questions, and there is quite a few, and I don't know if we can have them on this screen, or are they behind us? Are they? Okay, great. But there's a couple of questions here, and I would like to read one of them. And Coco, if you would pay attention for a moment, because I think this is a question for you. But Mr. Abogatis, I think it'd be really useful for you to also maybe respond to this question as well. I will read this one. It reads as, we are in unison for breaking silos and coherence to be more effective, to avoid, I can't read that word. Is it redundancy?
Avoid redundancy.
Redundancy and optimize resources. Should we push for one global agreement rather than multiple agreements? It's a very interesting question, and thank you to the audience. It's been rated very highly. Coco, I might ask you to maybe reflect on that question for a moment, and while Mr. Abogatis, you might like to respond first to that question. Sure. If you would, you may have a very strong view about that. And then
No, for us, there is one agreement, it's the 2030 agenda. It's clear enough for us, and we are using that, and we are discussing that with the UN agencies. There is one big agenda which focuses on the person and the planet, and we are trying to realign policies and plans looking after the well-being of the people and the sustainability. So that in our documents you can see that in our webpage. And we have now putting in place tools to the follow-up and improving, and it's open to any citizen, and it's for all the functions of the state, not for one. So that's the way. The real challenge is trying to see in all the territory, in every area. I mentioned Peru with the Amazonian, the Andes, even the ocean. It's a lot of problems with the ocean. So how to understand that? All the capacity in our academics and research centers is not enough to try to understand and to see, to get informed data. We are using more and more administrative data or immediate data. We are not using census. We use, of course, census and surveys, but now it's much more important to use continuous data, and we are doing so. I can mention some examples to react immediately. At the same time, we're trying to see the local thing and go back to state policies, which is a big effort. So that's the thing. I think it's the people is the agenda. Yeah.
Thank you. Coco, would you like to also respond on that?
Yes, and maybe I can respond just in my personal capacity, just as a very humble person who's happened to be supporting and following the climate negotiations under the UNFCCC framework. Ultimately, we're looking for inclusive multilateralism, and that is in the hands of the parties that come together around UNFCCC's table. You've given us the mandate to do that, or other UN forums. We hear this debate a lot, particularly, just as one example, the Paris Agreement. Many of the expert communities here at all levels were making the point about coherence in Paris. I was listening, and you'd hear all sorts of really, really critical things that we're dedicated to: human rights, indigenous peoples, people on the move, be it migration, displacement, refugees, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, countries have a job to do around these various tables. And I think the field of tension is, do we create an overwhelming burden in one agreement, or do we forget some parts? And I think that's the key question around coherence. I don't know the answer. What I have seen, and it vaguely echoes, of course, what Your Excellency was saying, is I have seen a great power in networks. Those countries and ministries which participate in the UNFCCC process brief their capitals. There's a huge apparatus of ministries or even individuals reaching out to other colleagues. I see it in Met services worldwide. I'm just looking at our friends from Belize who are so critical and important in the UNFCCC discussions, but you also have all kinds of conversations at home and in the regions. I see important networks here in Geneva, in some ways the home of peace and prosperity and stability. I see colleagues working in the topic of human mobility. Displacement is something that many of you have been looking at and hearing about this week. They reach across the different agreements or across the tables and make sure that countries are hearing and listening. So there's a great power in networks amongst people in bureaucracies in countries that keep in touch with each other, with expert communities that keep in touch across these different forums. And that is also a way to do it. It's not only one agreement, but it is looking at our system with all sorts of different strengths, as well as maybe things that we're not so good at yet, and making sure that we're having a conversation together, if that makes sense. So I'm looking at a friend up in the seats, who's played a really critical role in making sure that countries are understanding what people who have been displaced by natural disasters or by slow onset disasters, what they need and what kinds of opportunities are there in the future, working side by side with UN agencies, being present here at the global platform, making sure that progress is made under the Paris Agreement and in our task force on displacement, and many other areas. So I think there's great power, if countries so wish, one agreement. And there are lots of additional ways to reach towards coherence. Ultimately, it is the unity of purpose and the very nuanced ways of making sure that there is coherence where it matters most for people who are affected. I think that provides a lot of hope and a lot of ideas of how we can move forward together.
Thank you, Coco. The real tension, I think, often is about this efficient use of resources and the burdensome of this collective approach to integration. And I really did like the comment that you made, Sir, around, as part of the reporting process, is the better use of administrative data, because this is such a natural place for our countries to actually strengthen, and I think that is a critical point. I wanted to pose a question to you, sir, if I may, Minister. There is a question on the app here, and clearly there are people in the audience that want to know a little bit more about what Germany is doing to foster coherence between the Sendai framework, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the Paris Agreement in Germany. So I think the previous question was about the development cooperation.
So thank you. It's a little bit difficult for me to talk about Germany in the panel where we have to tackle the worldwide problems of disaster risk, but let me add that climate change is also increasingly challenging Germany, my home country. We had in the last year strong storm and heavy rain events, and my colleagues remember last summer when we had a heat wave that affected people, nature and economy. So the necessity of dealing with extreme weather has to be faced by our municipalities, by the federal states, our Bundesländer, and the federal government within their specific remits on civil protection. So my government has formed an interministerial working group that is mandated to ensure a coherent implementation of the global agendas in the field of DRR. And this working group consists of 4 ministries in my country on the national level. It's the Federal Foreign Office, it's the Ministry for the Interior, it's the Ministry for Environment, and it's my ministry, the Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And together with other selected institutions and specialized organizations, we try to get more national expertise in disaster risk reduction and adaptation to the impacts of climate change, development, cooperation, as well as humanitarian assistance. And Germany is currently elaborating a national resilience strategy that takes into account already existing sector strategies in climate change adaptation, sustainable development, and critical infrastructure. So we try to develop a national strategy and transfer this national strategy into international circumstances.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution. There is another question here. Madam Suzuma, I might invite you to tackle this one. It actually is a question around the reflection on the role and contribution of the private sector in fostering coherence at the national and also at the regional levels. I'm wondering if you have some experience around working with the private sector. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Le secteur privé du continent africain joue un grand rôle. Ce secteur ne participait pas en tant que tel à certains aspects de la vie de la communauté. C'est le secteur privé par nature. Il faut chercher de l'argent. Mais nous les sensibilisons aujourd'hui pour que le secteur privé s'intéresse aux questions dont justement la lutte contre le réchauffement et leur contribution, parce que on ne doit pas dupliquer ce qu'on a vu ailleurs avec ce secteur privé en termes de réchauffement de la planète et en travaillant que ce secteur privé aussi puisse apporter sa contribution à la préservation de l'environnement. Nous travaillons beaucoup avec ce secteur, mais on les amène à venir eux-mêmes. On a certaines personnes sur le continent qui ont suffisamment de moyens et nous sommes convaincus que ces gens pourront apporter une contribution justement aux questions de RRC. Je voulais aussi, il y a une question, je vais profiter, madame, comme j'ai le micro. Il y a un des orateurs qui a parlé du déplacement forcé des populations. C'est une réalité, c'est l'une des causes aujourd'hui majeures du déplacement forcé des populations sur le continent africain, les changements climatiques. On a vu tout dernièrement ce qui s'est passé au Zimbabwe, au Malawi et Mozambique. C'était très triste. Ça entraîne des déplacements forcés et nous appelons le secteur privé justement à apporter cette contribution pour nous permettre de soulager la détresse des victimes. La question n'est pas tellement développée, mais nous nous arrangeons vraiment pour les intéresser. C'est d'ailleurs ce qui a fait que les chefs d'État se sont intéressés à cette question de changement climatique et en lien avec le déplacement forcé sur le continent pour faire du thème de l'année 2019 focalisé sur les réfugiés, personnes déplacées et qui retournent dans leur pays. C'est une question et j'ai beaucoup apprécié ce que la dame du PNUD a dit, à savoir question de gouvernance, changement climatique et développement. C'est quand même quelque chose d'important et on ne peut pas le faire aussi et sans la contribution aussi du secteur privé. Merci, Madame la modératrice.
Thank you very much, Madam. And thank you for reflecting on the utility of the private sector in these processes. We have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to tackle another question, if I may. I was told I had complete authority to decide which questions I would choose, so I'm going to do that. And there is a question here, Coco, that I think would be well worth you having a go at answering, and I've just now lost it. Here we are. How can we help the least developed countries to minimize the costs for resources? And I've just lost it again. Can anybody see it up there?
No, it's not.
It's not on your thing? Okay.
No, it's stuff. Which is?
I've lost it. Okay. This is such a small screen. How can we help the less developed countries to minimize the costs for resources that are pro-sustainable development, such as recycled paper, energy, or other environmentally friendly items? For all our environmentally friendly people, I thought this was a really interesting question. Coco, would you like me to repeat that question?
Yeah.
How can we help the less developed countries to minimize the costs for resources that are pro-sustainable development, such as recycled paper, energy, or other environmentally friendly items? And in fact, I'm very happy to open it up to the rest of the panel. But this is about traction. This is about on-the-ground reality of what the translation of these policies should look like. Yeah. So thank you.
It's a wonderful question. I don't know the answer. And so for any experts as well as excellencies in the room, please do help me. I can only speak humbly, again, from what I experience in the place that I live. And I live in Bonn, Germany. I'm from the United States. But I notice there have been documentary films going around that raise awareness about this how humans are interacting with nature, and particularly packaging and the materials that we use every day. We use paper and plastics, et cetera, et cetera. And there have been a lot of very prominent documentary films, at least circulating in Europe. Maybe you have seen them as well. And I know the situation in Europe is different from the situation in LDCs and other places in the world. But it's really concerned me just as a person. When I go to the grocery store, everything is packaged in plastics. And it really concerns me. And I took a lot of hope, again, Audrey, from Pacific Island countries. Some of our colleagues there have said, well, in our country, one of my colleagues from SPREP, I think he lives in Samoa, said, in our country, we don't allow single-use plastics. And so I noticed that he had a cloth bag. And he said, oh yeah, that's because in our country, we don't have single-use plastics. We can't really dispose of them. And it's, of course, unacceptable to toss them in our most precious resource, the ocean. And I think, again, I don't have the answer, but I think we have a lot to learn from those national governments, civil society, regional cooperations that are taking the courageous step to help us modern citizens understand how do we live with the convenience that we've now embraced so fully, and the stewardship that we have for our planet, our communities. We want clean and hygienic and healthy, et cetera, and sustainable more than anything. And so just with that, we're looking actually to you and as leaders to show us the way. And I'm sorry for such a lame answer. I don't know the answer. Perhaps you do.
Would you like to respond to that?
Bueno, es un múltiple nivel, pero creo que el fondo también está hecho en la Agenda 2030, es cómo desacoplamos temas de producción y consumo. Eso requiere, por supuesto, múltiples. El primer gran nivel son decisiones muy difíciles, muy complicadas, de política, es decir, qué se usa y qué no se usa, ¿no es cierto? Y ese golpe de política tiene una serie de consecuencias económicas, sociales, ambientales. Entonces, tomar las grandes decisiones por un lado en políticas, pero la otra es otra vez la gente en su día a día, qué usa, qué no usa. Y eso sí, ya muchos países ya prohibieron el uso de los no diarios. Entonces, hay diversas formas, pero sí creo que a nivel de las políticas grandes, ¿no es cierto?, y de la Agenda 2030 y de cambio climático, hay temas como, por ejemplo, esta relación difícil producción-consumo, que creo que está bastante bien estudiada, pero exige más análisis y decisiones muy complicadas en todos los países y quizá más en los más industrializados. Sí.
I am aware that was a fairly tough question, but one of the challenges, I think, particularly in the Pacific, is that often, these regional conversations and these policy framework dialogue get stuck at the regional and national levels, and so the distillation of that at a practical level is often really, really challenging. And in the Pacific, you can see now that the issue of plastics has now becoming such a challenging issue for us that it is affecting livelihoods. The Pacific Ocean, 70% of our protein comes from the ocean, and now we are finding that our fish is completely filled with plastic. And so this is affecting the livelihoods of our communities and our population. So I apologize, it was a tough question, but for me, these things, the distillation of the reality of these often is very, very challenging. So thank you, audience, for these incredibly interesting questions. I'm now going to invite our panelists, in the last few minutes, just to make some last reflective comments as they fit, maybe just reflecting on the conversation that's happened before we bring this to a close. Thank you. Madam Suzuma, I might invite you first.
Merci beaucoup. Ça a été un honneur pour nous de faire partie de ce panel et nous insisterons sur, je vois la salle est vraiment pleine, sur la nécessité pour chacun de nous d'apporter sa contribution à cette cohérence dont nous avons parlé, et je suis sûr chacun à son niveau de responsabilité pourra apporter un plus. Et également, il s'agit pour nous tous d'utiliser des réseaux de partenaires entre nous au niveau régional, au niveau de nos continents, pour partager les expériences. On apprend... Madame a parlé de poissons chevaux infectés par les plastiques. Nous, ce sont les animaux qui meurent à cause du papier plastique. Nos rivières sont polluées et je voudrais partager aussi pour terminer l'expérience et vous dire que chacun de nous peut contribuer à réduire les risques de catastrophes et chacun de nous et chaque pays a son rôle à jouer. Je prendrai l'exemple du Rwanda. J'ai parcouru beaucoup de pays dans ma carrière de 30 ans, mais je n'ai jamais vu un pays comme le Rwanda où vous ne verrez pas de plastique. Vous ne verrez pas de plastique parce qu'on vous récupère votre plastique à l'aéroport. Et dans la ville, vous n'en trouverez pas. C'est interdit et c'est rentré dans les mentalités de tout un chacun. Et vous avez parlé du papier à recycler. Ce papier est recyclé pour être utilisé comme emballage dans les magasins. Et ces papiers se détruisent plus facilement. C'est vous dire que la coordination est nécessaire. Tous les programmes dont nous parlons et chacun de nous, c'est l'appel que je lance, pourra apporter sa contribution. Les Caraïbes sont concernés, mais l'Afrique est le continent aussi qui subit malheureusement les dégâts des changements climatiques. En tout cas, ça a été un honneur et un plaisir pour nous. Et merci beaucoup, Madame la modératrice.
Thank you very much. Minister, may I ask you to make some final comments?
So thank you. When we heard the problems of Africa, of Latin America, and other parts of the world, I think if we tackle the challenges in front of us, we have to fostering coherence between our global agendas, and this requires more awareness, more political will, more resources, and more action by public and by private stakeholders. So I repeat my plea from my initial statement. There are no blueprints. We can only strive to get closer to a state of coherence that helps to reduce the costs of incoherent action and to capitalize the benefits of the coherence. The idea of good enough coherence should guide us in this respect. Let me finish by reiterating Germany's will to contribute further to harmonizing and bridging DRR and CSEA in our international development cooperation. In this sense, we would be happy to join a Sendai stakeholder group to create a DRR-CCA policy brief and a strategy of joint actions leading up to the General Climate Change Summit and beyond. We would as well like to contribute to a high-level session on DRR and climate change at COP25.
Sir, may I invite you for some final comments?
Sí, quizá dos aspectos, uno más micro, que es el que hemos estado conversando, que es otra vez la vida de la gente. Es decir, la vida diaria de la gente en territorios muy diferentes, en condiciones culturales muy diferentes, pero tenemos una limitación muy grande para conocer esas realidades. Entonces, creo que hacer esfuerzos por conocer y entender mejor realidades diversas y que eso regrese después a una toma de decisiones más integrada. Y ese fraccionamiento que hay en las tomas de decisiones económicas, sociales, ambientales, lo seguimos notando y es natural, cada ministerio defiende su parte, pero no puede seguir así, o sea, sigue así. Es urgente entonces enfocar a evitar daño que es evitable. O sea, en la vida de la gente uno puede tener pérdidas de potencial en el ser humano que sí se pueden evitar. Entonces, claro, podemos decir violencia, y ahí vienen derechos humanos, o contaminación o accidentes evitables, pero también los desastres y también el cambio climático. Entonces, en la vida de la gente todo eso está integrado, no está separado. Y en el otro extremo, creo que hay evidencia científica suficiente para que el análisis científico de mayor alcance esté presente. Basta con el informe de IPCC de 1,5 grados. Entonces, creo que necesitamos hacer las dos, debemos hacer varias cosas al mismo tiempo. Que no hay la capacidad, no hay la capacidad. En el caso nuestro no tenemos la capacidad suficiente para hacer los análisis que hay que hacer, así que necesitamos trabajar todos juntos, y esos son todos, sociedad, Estado, partidos políticos, tanto a nivel local, regional o mundial. Gracias.
Thank you. Coco.
It's been so rich and learning from all of you, of course. The final comment that comes to mind, and I don't want to be overly simplistic or trite, but we need applied imagination. Humanity, if you look over as much as we know about ourselves, which is quite limited, 100 years or maybe a few millennia, the greatest accomplishments we've accomplished together. Never at this scale. Humanity has never been connected as we are today. And that's both a challenge, but also our greatest opportunity to raise our sights and think about what could the world be like? What do we want to create together? And again, that's our greatest challenge and opportunity. There are lots of opportunities that I've heard here this week. For example, listening to this discussion about inclusion, people who have different abilities, people who may, for whatever reason, be marginalized today, have so much to teach us. I'll just name one. Last week, there was a large report that some of you may have seen in the news about biodiversity, the state of biodiversity worldwide. It's quite grave. We rely on biodiversity for the very food that we eat, among many other things, as well as the miracle that all of these beautiful living things are. Indigenous people have shown, it's documented that Indigenous people who have stewardship over some of the most biodiverse, rich areas of the world are doing better. Perhaps because of a unique experience and a unique set of values. We have so much to learn from them. We have a lot to learn from people who have a variety of abilities and disabilities, as we've talked about here. But this is our chance to listen, and it is not only because we want to leave no one behind, of course, but it is because if we want to achieve a very possible, very difficult, bright future together, we can't afford not to be inclusive. Some of the best ideas will come from those who we aren't listening to enough yet. And we will benefit, our imagination and our ability to act together will benefit through many of the things that we've heard together. And I'll end with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and I think all of you as panelists have done a very good job in your summaries and capturing some of the issues. And maybe just from my side, so firstly, thank you for your contributions. I've very much appreciated the effort that you've made in bringing to light some of these key things. We have together, collectively, I think, highlighted, some very important issues as we move towards the UN Climate Summit. The recommendations that I hope many of you are making now on your app, and for those of you who've come into the session after my introductory remarks, there is a mechanism on your app where you can actually make recommendations on this particular session and recommendations that will be included in the report moving forward to the Climate Summit. The case for coherence is very compelling, and we've talked a little bit today about the Sendai framework and, of course, both national and local DRR strategies that would act as catalysts for a much more coherent and therefore efficient and effective way of action. We touched a little bit on the greater coherence, allowing for both financial and human integration, and this is to be used more efficiently. We talked a little bit about synergies being identified for an improved knowledge base that can generate better and improved policies. And I think we talked a little bit this morning about the strengthening of an inclusive approach that I think has a strong focus on reducing poverty and vulnerability. It was really pleasing to hear from UNDP on the positive gains that have been made at a global level with the watchful eyes of the UN, how countries are really starting to merge those two key thematic areas. So thank you for sharing those with us. Ladies and gentlemen, to the audience, thank you for your full participation and engagement and for the very creative questions that you provided the panel today. To the esteemed panelists, thank you for your dedicated efforts and your time and for really allowing this very important dialogue to take place. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This does bring to the end the High Level 5. To the signers, thank you very much. And to the logistics team that enabled this to happen, my grateful thanks. Have a lovely rest of the afternoon. Thank you.